What do you do when your entire family has always favored your younger sibling, giving them everything, including your future? Grace Mitchell spent years quietly working, slowly acquiring shares in the family business. Meanwhile, her sister Tiffany flaunted her new BMW. And a promotion she didn't earn. But Grace wasn't just playing the long game, she was about to change everything. Stay tuned to watch Grace take back control of her future. My channel's struggling, so if you're intrigued, please comment 1 to help me out. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Subscribe to see how it ends, and I wish you all good health. That's a beautiful car, Tiffany, my mother exclaimed, running her hand along the smooth red surface of my sister's brand new BMW. You truly deserve this after all your hard work. I stood on the driveway, arms crossed, silently watching the little celebration unfold. Tiffany basked in our parents' attention, flaunting her new car keys like they were precious gems. My name is Grace Mitchell, and at 24, I was watching my college fund go toward buying my younger sister her dream car. Isn't it perfect? Tiffany squealed, her designer heels clicking sharply against the concrete as she circled her new toy. The dealership said this was the last one in this color. I just knew it had to be mine. Of course it did. Everything was always meant to be Tiffany's. That's how it had always been in our family. Tiffany wanted something, and Tiffany got it no matter who it belonged to. Well, it was the smart choice, my father declared, wrapping his arm around Tiffany's shoulders. Your sister clearly wasn't going to use that money for anything worthwhile. At least this way, it isn't going to waste. I fought to keep my retort in check. My plans to pursue an MBA weren't worthwhile in their eyes. Never mind the fact that I'd spent the last 3 years juggling full-time work while earning my bachelor's degree in business with honors. Never mind that I had already been accepted into 3 prestigious programs. To them, Tiffany's need for a luxury car was clearly far more important than my education. Don't look so sour, Grace, my mother chided, noticing the expression on my face. You know Tiffany needs a proper car for her new job. Ah, yes, the prestigious position as a junior marketing assistant at Mitchell Industries, a job my father had conveniently arranged for her, the same company where I had been grinding my way up from the mailroom since I was 19, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. But Tiffany, of course, couldn't be expected to drive anything less than a BMW to her first real job. Of course, I said, my voice carefully measured. Congratulations, Tiffany. She barely acknowledged me, too busy snapping selfies with her new car. Thanks. Maybe if you work really hard, you can afford one someday. Our parents laughed indulgently at her little jab. They always found it amusing when Tiffany reminded me of my place in the family pecking order. I glanced at my watch, grateful for the excuse to escape. I should get going. I have an early meeting tomorrow. On a Saturday? My mother frowned. Grace, you work too much. It's not healthy. Someone has to, I muttered under my breath, but they didn't hear. They were already discussing where to take Tiffany for a celebration dinner. As I walked toward my sensible used sedan, I could hear Tiffany's voice echoing across the driveway. Maybe we should reupholster the interior in white leather. The black is so boring. I smiled faintly as I started my car. Let them have their little celebration. In 3 months, at the annual shareholders meeting, they'd find out exactly what all those early morning meetings had been for. What my family didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I hadn't just been working my way up through Mitchell Industries. I had been playing a much longer game. It all began 5 years ago, when I was 19 and had just started at the company. One day, while sorting mail, I came across a letter addressed to my father. It was from his former business partner, Arthur Wright, a man who had helped found Mitchell Industries but had been bought out years ago when financial troubles hit. The letter was a desperate plea. Arthur was dying and needed to sell his remaining shares in the company, shares my father didn't even know he still owned. Arthur had kept them as a safety net, but now he needed the money for medical treatments. I should have delivered that letter to my father's office. Instead, I took it home and called Arthur myself. What followed was 6 months of careful negotiation, using every penny I'd saved from my after-school jobs and a small inheritance from my grandmother. Arthur was grateful to find a buyer who'd pay a fair price, and even more pleased that it was someone who understood the company's history. Your father's forgotten where he came from, Arthur told me during our final meeting. He's forgotten that Mitchell Industries was built on hard work, not handouts. Maybe you can remind him someday. By the time I was 20, I quietly owned 15% of Mitchell Industries. But I didn't stop there. Over the next 4 years, I tracked down other minor shareholders, retired employees, early investors, anyone willing to sell. Every spare dollar I earned went into buying shares, always through a holding company I'd set up with the help of a trusted lawyer. Last month, I had finally reached my goal, 51% ownership of Mitchell Industries. The paperwork was filed, the transfers complete, and in 3 months, at the annual shareholders meeting, everything would become public. My phone buzzed as I drove home, a text from Tiffany. Don't be jealous. Maybe if you hadn't wasted so much time in the mailroom, you'd have something to show for yourself too. I didn't bother responding. Let her enjoy her BMW. I had bigger things to worry about. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn, just like I did every Saturday. The security guard, Frank, gave me his usual friendly nod. Early as always, Miss Mitchell, he said, buzzing me in. Your father know you're here, I smiled. My father doesn't know a lot of things, Frank. I made my way to my small office, not the corner office I deserved given my actual ownership stake, but the modest space befitting someone who'd wasted time in the mailroom. The walls were covered in organizational charts, workflow diagrams, and detailed notes about every aspect of Mitchell Industries' operations. While Tiffany had been partying through college and my parents had been indulging her every whim, I had been learning, watching, planning. I knew every strength and weakness of the company my grandfather had built, and my father had nearly run into the ground with his poor decisions and nepotistic management style. My laptop pinged with an email from my lawyer, confirming that everything was in place for the shareholders' meeting. I'd already arranged for several key board members to be there, ones who'd been increasingly concerned about my father's leadership but hadn't known there was an alternative. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Emily from accounting, one of the few people who had noticed my potential early on and had become a mentor of sorts. I saw Tiffany's new car on Instagram, she said, closing the door behind her. Your college fund, I presume? I nodded. Emily was one of the only people who knew the full truth about my situation. Your father's going to regret that decision, she said, sitting down across from me. Have you told them anything? Not a word, I replied, turning my laptop to show her the latest company financials. Look at this! Third quarter profits are down 15% because Dad insisted on giving Tiffany's boyfriend's startup an exclusive contract. The board's getting restless. Emily studied the numbers, shaking her head. It's worse than I thought. You're sure you're ready for this? I gestured to the walls covered in my research and planning. I've been ready for years. The question is, are they ready for me? They're not, Emily said with a small smile. That's what makes this so interesting. See, the next few hours were spent reviewing reports and finalizing strategies. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Tiffany. Dad's taking me shopping for office furniture. He says I need something suitable for my new promotion. I raised an eyebrow at Emily. Did you hear about this promotion? She rolled her eyes. Your father announced it yesterday. Tiffany's going to be heading up the new marketing division. No experience required, apparently. Of course, I said, turning back to my work. Heaven forbid she actually earned something. The rest of the day passed quickly, and by the time I left the office, I had everything in place for the next phase of my plan. As I walked to my car, I noticed Tiffany's new BMW. Parked in the executive spot. My father had undoubtedly already assigned to her. 3 months, I thought to myself. In 3 months, everything would change. That evening, I received an invitation to a family dinner, a celebration of Tiffany's promotion, no doubt. I briefly considered declining, but there was no point in arousing suspicion now. Besides, after years of enduring their subtle digs and blatant favoritism, what was one more dinner? I arrived at my parents' house exactly on time, stepping into a scene that felt as though it had been lifted from any of our family gatherings over the past 2 decades. Tiffany was holding court in the living room, entertaining our parents with stories about her first week at work. And then I told Jennifer, that dowdy woman from HR, that her presentation needed more pizzazz. she was saying, her tone laced with self-importance. She looked upset, but Daddy agreed with me, didn't you, Daddy? My father smiled at her, his expression indulgent. Of course, Princess. You have natural leadership instincts. I took a seat quietly, biting my tongue, wondering if anyone else noticed the irony of praising leadership instincts in someone who had never actually led anything in her life. Oh, Grace, my mother said, finally acknowledging me. You're here. We were just discussing Tiffany's wonderful ideas for restructuring the marketing department. Fascinating, I murmured, accepting the glass of wine she handed me. And what experience are you drawing on for these restructuring plans, Tiffany? My sister's flawless smile faltered for a split second. Well, I took a marketing class last semester, and Daddy always says that sometimes fresh eyes are more valuable than experience. How convenient, I said, taking a deliberate sip of wine. Now, Grace, my father chimed in, his tone laced with that familiar note of disapproval. Don't be bitter just because your sister has vision. We can't all be natural leaders. I thought about the documents in my briefcase, the shares I'd quietly amassed, the sweeping changes I was about to bring to Mitchell Industries. No, I agreed softly, my voice steady. We can't all be natural leaders. Some of us have to earn it. The next 2 weeks blurred by in a whirlwind of preparation and careful observation. From my modest office, I watched as Tiffany settled into her new role as marketing director, mostly by ordering overpriced furniture and making life miserable for longtime employees. She made Claire cry again, Emily reported one morning, slamming my office door with more force than necessary. 20 years in marketing, and your sister told her she doesn't understand modern consumers because she dared to point out that the new campaign was over budget. I glanced up from the quarterly reports I was reviewing. Let me guess, Dad sided with Tiffany? Naturally, Emily scoffed. He said Claire needs to be more open to fresh perspectives. She made air quotes with exaggerated disdain. Half the marketing team is updating their resumes. I made a note in my planner. Good employees were hard to come by, and I'd need them when I took control. Tell Claire to hold off on any decisions until after the shareholders' meeting. Things will be different then. Emily gave me a knowing look. Speaking of which, your father's been asking about the proxy votes coming in. He seems nervous. He should be, I replied, turning my laptop toward her to show the latest numbers. The board isn't happy with last quarter's performance. Add in Tiffany's promotion and the mass exodus of experienced employees. It's the perfect storm. Emily finished studying the screen. You know they're going to fight back when they realize what's happening. I thought about my college fund, now sitting in my sister's driveway in the form of a red BMW. Let them try. That evening, I was working late as usual when I heard voices from my father's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I couldn't help overhearing the conversation. The board is getting restless, Richard, a male voice said, probably Robert Henderson, one of the senior board members. These nepotistic appointments have to stop. Tiffany is perfectly qualified, my father insisted. She's bringing fresh energy to the company. Fresh energy doesn't make up for alienating our best employees, and now I'm hearing rumors about someone buying up shares. I smiled to myself as I gathered my things. The pieces were falling into place. The next morning, I arrived to find Tiffany in my office, perched on my desk like she owned it. There you are! I need your help with something. So, I set my briefcase down carefully. What can I do for you, Tiffany? Daddy says you know all the boring operational stuff, she said, examining her manicure. I need you to redo these budget reports. They make my department look bad. I accepted the folder she thrust at me, opening it to find the marketing department's latest financial statements. The numbers were worse than I'd expected. I can't change financial reports, Tiffany. That would be fraud. She rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. Just move some numbers around. No one actually reads these things anyway. The board does, I said quietly. And so do I. Whatever, she huffed, sliding off my desk. Just fix it. Oh, and I'm taking your parking spot. Mine's too far from the entrance, and these heels are killing me. After she left, I carefully documented our conversation and added it to my growing file. 2 more months until the shareholders' meeting. The weeks that followed brought more of the same. Tiffany's inexperience and entitlement were creating ripples throughout the company. Longtime clients were getting frustrated, employees were leaving, and the board was growing increasingly concerned. My father remained oblivious, convinced that any criticism of Tiffany was just jealousy or resistance to change. He even called a company-wide meeting to announce another expansion of her responsibilities. I sat in the back of the conference room, watching as he proudly introduced Tiffany's innovative new initiatives. My sister stood beside him, basking in the attention, while confused and angry employees exchanged glances. Furthermore, my father announced, Tiffany will be presenting Mitchell Industries at next month's industry conference in New York. Her fresh perspective is exactly what we need to attract new investors. I made another note in my planner. The conference was just a week before the shareholders' meeting. Perfect timing. The day of Tiffany's presentation arrived. I watched the live stream from my office as she confidently took the stage, wearing an outfit that cost more than most employees' monthly salaries. Mitchell Industries is entering a new era, she declared, clicking through slides that made financial analysts in the audience exchange alarmed looks. Under my leadership, we're going to revolutionize everything. I closed my laptop, unable to watch anymore. In 1 hour, she had managed to tank our stock price and violate several SEC regulations. The shareholders' meeting couldn't come soon enough. That evening, my father called an emergency family meeting. Tiffany had returned from New York early, her presentation having been cut short when several major investors walked out. I checked my watch. The board is already meeting. They called it an hour ago. My father's face paled. What? Why wasn't I informed? Because, Dad, I said, standing up. I own 51% of Mitchell Industries, and the board just voted unanimously to support my appointment as CEO. The silence that followed was deafening. That's impossible, my father finally whispered. Is it? I asked. Did you ever wonder why Arthur Wright's shares never showed up in your reports, or why so many small shareholders have been selling over the past few years? Did you even notice? Tiffany pointed a shaking finger at me. You planned this? For 5 years? I confirmed. Ever since you started talking about how you were going to revolutionize the company. Ever since Dad made it clear that merit meant nothing compared to being his favorite. We gave you everything, my mother protested. No, I corrected her. You gave Tiffany everything, including my college fund. I built this myself, 1 share at a time, while you were all too busy celebrating her mediocrity to notice. My father stood up, his face red with anger. I won't allow this! You don't have a choice, I said, heading for the door. The shareholders' meeting is tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I suggest you all be there. Professional dress code, Tiffany. No Louboutins. As I walked toward my car, Tiffany's wails and my father's angry shouts echoed behind me. 5 years of meticulous planning swallowing their insults, biding my time had led to this moment. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the shareholders' meeting arrived, clear and bright. I got to the office 2 hours early, taking a quiet moment to savor the stillness before the storm hit. The conference room was ready, each place setting carefully arranged with financial reports detailing the decline of Mitchell Industries under my father's leadership. Emily met me at the door, coffee in hand. Your family's already here. Your father's been trying to access the main conference room for the past hour. I took the coffee with a smile. Good thing we changed the security codes last week. Are the board members in? All confirmed. The press is gathering in the lobby. I hadn't invited the media, but word of Tiffany's disastrous conference presentation had leaked, along with rumors of a major leadership change. Mitchell Industries was one of the largest employers in the region. What happened today would be front-page news. Miss Mitchell, Frank, the security guard, called out. Your father's demanding entrance to your office. Says he needs to speak with you before the meeting. I glanced at my watch. Let him in. Nay. Moments later, my father stormed into the room, his face flushed with fury. This ends now, Grace. I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm still CEO of this company. Actually, I said, sliding a document across the desk toward him, you're not. The board voted yesterday, but you'd know that if you bothered checking your emails instead of dealing with Tiffany's damage control. He grabbed the paper, his hands trembling. This is absurd. I built this company. Grandfather built this company, I corrected him. You inherited it, then nearly destroyed it with poor management and nepotism. The shareholders have had enough. Shareholders? He scoffed. What shareholders? I controlled the majority of shares. Not anymore. I pulled up the ownership records on my laptop. Want to see exactly how many shares you've lost over the years? How many people sold out because they lost faith in your leadership? His face drained of color as he stared at the screen. Arthur's shares, but he promised they'd stay in trusted hands. And they have, I said quietly. I've spent the last 5 years learning every detail of this business from the ground up, something you can't say about your chosen successor. Tiffany has potential. Huh? Tiffany has entitlement, I countered. She proved that to the entire industry at the conference. Our stock dropped 15% in 1 hour, Dad. 15%. Because your precious princess couldn't be bothered to learn basic securities law before sharing confidential projections. He slumped into a chair, suddenly looking older, wearier. Why didn't you tell me? If you were buying shares, building your position, why the secrecy? Would you have listened? I shot back. When have you ever listened to me about anything before? Before he could respond, the door to my office flew open. Tiffany stormed in, followed by our mother. Fix this! Tiffany demanded, her voice shrill. I've already announced my plans for the company. I have a vision. Your vision tanked our stock price and violated SEC regulations, I said calmly. The only reason we're not facing an investigation is because I spent all night doing damage control with our legal team. That's not fair. Daddy, tell her it's not fair. Our father didn't respond. He just sat there, still staring at the ownership records on my laptop. The shareholders' meeting starts in 30 minutes, I said, standing. You can either attend with some professionalism and dignity or make a scene and get escorted out. Your choice. Tiffany turned to our mother, who had been unusually quiet. Mom, say something. But our mother was looking around my office, really seeing it for the first time. The detailed reports covering the walls, the years of research and planning evident in every corner. All those early mornings, she said softly. All those late nights. We thought you were we didn't... Didn't what, Mom? Didn't think I could build something on my own? Didn't believe I had ambition beyond being Tiffany's backup? I always knew you were smart, she defended weakly. But business, leadership, it's not really suitable for women. I finished the sentence. Funny, that only seemed to apply to me. Tiffany's gender wasn't an issue when you were celebrating her unearned promotion. The intercom buzzed. Emily's voice cut through the tension. The shareholders are arriving, Miss Mitchell. I gathered my files. It's time. Are you coming? They followed me to the main conference room, Tiffany still protesting, my father unnaturally quiet, my mother wringing her hands. The halls were lined with employees watching curiously as we passed. The conference room was packed. Board members sat at the front, many nodding to me as I entered. Shareholders filled the remaining seats, with media hovering at the back. All eyes followed us as we made our way to the front. I took my place at the podium, surveying the room. 5 years of preparation had led to this moment. Good morning, I began. Thank you all for coming. As you know, Mitchell Industries has reached a critical juncture. For the next hour, I laid out the company's situation with brutal clarity. The declining profits, the exodus of talented employees, the damage to our reputation. I supported each point with detailed documentation, watching as shareholders nodded in growing understanding. When I reached Tiffany's conference presentation, she tried to interrupt, but a sharp look from a board member silenced her. Yesterday, the board voted unanimously for new leadership, I concluded. As majority shareholder and newly appointed CEO, I am implementing immediate changes to restore Mitchell Industries to its former excellence. The room erupted in questions. I answered each one thoroughly, demonstrating a knowledge of the company that made my father sink lower in his seat. Finally, one elderly shareholder stood up. Miss Mitchell, what role will your father and sister play in the restructured company? I met my father's eyes. They will be offered positions commensurate with their experience and qualifications, just like every other employee. Tiffany jumped up. This is ridiculous! I am the face of Mitchell Industries. I have plans. Your plans cost us millions in market value, I replied calmly. Please sit down, or security will escort you out. She looked around for support, finding none. Even our mother was staring at the table, avoiding eye contact. By the time I opened the floor for the final vote on my appointment as CEO, the outcome was clear. The motion passed overwhelmingly, with only my father and sister's minimal remaining shares dissenting. As the room cleared, my father approached the podium. Grace, he began. Yes? He seemed to deflate. I underestimated you all these years. Yes, I said simply. You did. As I sat down at what had been my father's desk, now mine, I looked out at the city, full of possibility, trying to get to work. The first month as CEO passed in a whirlwind of activity. The media attention was intense. Daughter's secret takeover saves family empire made headlines across business journals. I gave exactly one interview, focusing solely on my plans for Mitchell Industries' future. My family's reaction played out exactly as I'd expected. Tiffany launched a social media campaign, painting herself as the victim, complete with tearful Instagram stories about betrayal. She had to return the BMW and move back home with our parents when she could no longer afford her luxury apartment. Your sister's devastated, my mother said during one of her attempted guilt trips. She really thought she had a future here. I looked up from the quarterly projections I was reviewing. She did have a future here, Mom. She just needed to earn it like everyone else. But she's family. So am I replied calmly. That didn't stop you from taking my college fund. My mother flinched. That was different. Yes, it was, because I did something about it. I turned back to my work. Now, if there's nothing else, I have a company to run. The changes I implemented were sweeping but strategic. First, I reinstated the employees who had left because of Tiffany's mismanagement, including Claire from marketing, who now headed the department. Tiffany had nearly destroyed it, Claire commented during a staff meeting. It's different here now. People feel valued based on their contributions, not their connections. The company culture shifted rapidly. Merit-based promotions, transparent communication, and clear accountability became our new norm. The stock price responded accordingly, climbing steadily as investor confidence returned. My father made one attempt to challenge my leadership, calling an emergency board meeting to question my decisions. She's too inexperienced, he argued to the board members. She's making too many changes too quickly. Robert Henderson, a senior board member, just laughed. Richard, in 1 month, your daughter has accomplished more than you did in the past 5 years. The numbers speak for themselves. They showed in the latest financial reports. Profits up 20%, employee retention improved, client confidence restored. The vote to maintain my leadership was unanimous. After the meeting, my father lingered in the boardroom. I still don't understand, he said quietly. How did you learn all this? I paid attention, I replied, gathering my files. Every day for 5 years. While you were focused on grooming Tiffany for a role she didn't earn, I was learning from the mailroom to the boardroom. I studied every aspect of this company. The real question is, why didn't you notice? He had no answer for that. 3 months into my tenure as CEO, I received an unexpected visitor. Arthur Wright, my father's old partner who had sold me his shares, asked to meet. I've been following the news, he said, settling into a chair in my office, the same office where my father had dismissed my ambitions for so many years. You've done exactly what I hoped you would. The company needed change, I said simply. He smiled. Yes, but more than that, it needed someone who understood its true value. Your grandfather built this company on principles: hard work, merit, integrity. Your father forgot those principles, but you've embodied them. Yeah, I thought about the long years of careful planning, of silent work and patient preparation. I had good teachers. Speaking of teachers, Arthur leaned forward. I hear you're starting a scholarship program? I nodded. The Mitchell Industries Future Leader Scholarship, Full college funding for employees' children who demonstrate academic excellence and work ethic. We've already selected our first 10 recipients. Your mother must love that, he said with a knowing look. I allowed myself a small smile. She called it wasteful, said I should be focusing on family first. And what did you tell her? That I am focusing on family. The Mitchell Industries family. Every employee here is part of building our future. After Arthur left, I walked through the office, taking in the changes 6 months had brought. The energy was palpable, yet focused. Teams were collaborating seamlessly, and projects were advancing without a hitch. Emily fell into step beside me. You'll never guess who applied for an entry-level position in accounting. Who? Tiffany. I stopped in my tracks. Seriously? Emily nodded. And she listed your father as a reference. Do you have her application? Back in my office, I went through Tiffany's resume. It was bare no relevant experience, no real skills to speak of, just an incomplete marketing degree and a short, disastrous stint as our marketing director. She followed the application process properly? I asked, a little surprised. Yes, but she did try to skip the skills assessment, saying it was beneath her. I paused for a moment, thinking. Process her application like anyone else. If she meets the qualifications, she'll interview. If not, she'll get the same rejection letter we send to all underqualified candidates. That evening, as usual, I worked late, going over plans for our expansion. A knock on my door interrupted my focus. It was my mother. You look exhausted, she said, standing in the doorway. You work too much. Someone has to, I replied without looking up. Tiffany's application? She really needs this job, Grace. Her savings are running low, and your father's consulting business, well, it's struggling. I finally looked up at her. Then she should make sure her application shows she's qualified for the position. She's your sister. Yes, I agreed. And for years, that was enough. Not anymore. Nay, my mother sank into a chair. I don't understand you anymore. Where is this coldness coming from? It's not coldness, Mom. It's professionalism. Tiffany can earn her place here, just like I did. 2 days later, Tiffany's application was processed. She failed to meet 3 out of the 5 basic qualifications for the role. Standard rejection letter? Emily asked. I nodded. Yes, with information about our internship program and recommended courses at the local community college, just like we do for anyone underqualified. The letter went out that afternoon. Tiffany's response was predictable. A barrage of angry social media posts about betrayal and family loyalty. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my focus to our new initiative, a partnership with local colleges to offer work-study opportunities for business students, giving them real experience earned through merit and hard work. 6 months turned into a year. Mitchell Industries thrived under new leadership, expanding into new markets and building a solid reputation for innovation and excellence. Meanwhile, my father's consulting business continued to flounder until it eventually folded. He swallowed his pride and approached me for a position. I have decades of experience, he said, sitting across from my desk. Yes, I replied, but the company has changed. Are you willing to adapt, to report to managers who may be younger than you, to earn respect rather than demand it? He studied me for a long moment. You really have built something remarkable here. That night, as I prepared to leave, I passed the company photo wall in the lobby. My grandfather's portrait hung at the center, his expression serious but warm. Next to it now was a new photo, me at the shareholders' meeting taking my place as CEO. Emily appeared beside me. Your grandfather would be proud. Of the company? I asked. Of you, she corrected. For restoring what he built. I touched my grandfather's portrait softly. Merit over privilege, excellence over entitlement. Those were his beliefs, and they had become mine. Look at what it's become, Emily said. I had saved the company, but more importantly, I had transformed it. Together, we watched the employees head home after another productive day. They walked with purpose and pride, knowing their contributions were valued based on merit, not connections. This was my legacy, not just saving a company, but reshaping it into a place where everyone had the chance to earn success, just as I had. My phone buzzed, and I saw an email from the scholarship committee. Next year's applications were rolling in, each one representing someone ready to work for their dreams, just as I had years ago in the mailroom, preparing for the day I would earn my place at the top. The future looked bright, built on merit, not manipulation, built on earning, not entitlement, built on justice, served not coldly but with unwavering principle. What do you do when your entire life, all your hard work and sacrifices, has been ignored in favor of someone who's been handed everything? Do you let it slide, or do you take control and rewrite the rules? Grace Mitchell had spent years watching her younger sister Tiffany be celebrated for things she hadn't earned. While Grace worked tirelessly at Mitchell Industries, learning every aspect of the company and planning her future, Tiffany was handed a dream car and a promotion based on nothing but favoritism and family connections. But Grace wasn't just going to watch anymore. She had been quietly playing a long game, buying shares in the company, building her ownership to 51%, and preparing for the day when she would take control. When the time finally came, Grace didn't just take her place at the table, she completely changed the narrative. She was ready for everything Tiffany and their father could throw at her. They thought she was just a hard-working daughter who'd been overlooked. What they didn't know was that Grace was the one who truly understood the company, its values, and what it needed to thrive. So, what do you think? Was Grace right to take control of the family business, or did she go too far? How would you handle being in her shoes, seeing everything you've worked for handed over to someone with far less ambition? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
"You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the photo on Adam's phone. The teenage girl's sullen expression and dark makeup were unmistakable. It was Jenna, one of my most challenging tutoring students this year. Adam sighed deeply. "That's my daughter Amelia. She'll be coming to live with us next week." My heart pounded as realization set in. Amelia was the daughter he had briefly mentioned from a youthful fling before we met. But to have her show up now, after 16 years? This troubled girl was going to be under our roof? "Why the sudden change?" I asked carefully, my mind spinning. Adam rarely spoke of his past indiscretions. He shrugged. "Her mother's being deployed overseas for work. Amelia didn't want to move, so she'll stay with us." I studied his impassive expression, suspecting he wasn't being fully truthful. Still, this was a bombshell, a secret daughter upending our peaceful life together. Over the next few days, I watched Adam transform our guest room into a teenage girl's bedroom, painting the walls purple and setting up a desk for studying. I wondered if he was trying to atone for his past negligence as a father. When Amelia, or Jenna as I knew her, arrived, it was even more bizarre seeing her defiant sneer in our hallway. In my tutoring sessions, she had been constantly disruptive, with a concerning lack of effort. "Hey," she muttered flatly as Adam introduced us. I could already sense the challenges ahead with such a problematic houseguest. That first night, I overheard Amelia on a call in her room. "This place is a prison, Mom. I don't know how long I can keep up this stupid act." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Jenna came from a troubled home, but could she and her mother be putting on an elaborate con? Using Adam's own guilt against him for their gain? I knew I would have to tread very carefully. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's presence became increasingly disruptive. Her rude comments and blatant disregard for our household rules quickly frayed my nerves. Adam, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to address her behavior. "She's just a teenager finding her way," he'd say with a dismissive wave whenever I brought up her latest transgression. "Give her some space." Space? The girl was slowly taking over our home like an ill-mannered squatter. Her rooms were constantly trashed, she'd leave messes everywhere, and I'd catch her sneaking out at night multiple times. "Amelia, we need to talk about your actions," I stated firmly one morning after discovering she had stolen my good bottle of bourbon. "This cannot continue." She rolled her eyes defiantly. "Yeah, whatever. You're not my real mom." "Maybe not, but I deserve basic respect in this house," I shot back, my temper flaring. "Your father works hard to give you a home here." "Oh, Daddy works so hard, does he?" she sneered. "For whose benefit, I wonder?" The insinuation hung heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to retort, but Adam stepped between us. "That's enough, both of you. Amelia, go to your room." As she stormed off, I turned to Adam incredulously. "You're actually taking her side? After that attitude?" He avoided my gaze. "She's just a kid, Claire. Lashing out is normal for her age. So her blatant disrespect is okay? You're making excuses." We argued heatedly until I finally gave up, retreating to the bedroom in fuming silence. This was not the life I had envisioned when I married Adam. A few days later, I made a discovery that turned my world upside down. While using Adam's computer for work, I noticed his email was still logged in. Telling myself I shouldn't snoop, I started to close it, but a particular name in his inbox caught my eye. Jessica. My heart raced as I opened the email thread. The conversations dated back months before Amelia's arrival. Jessica was apparently her mother, and the emails detailed their plan for Amelia to move in and make herself at home with us. It was all a scheme, a ploy to insert their way into our lives, and judging by the frequent mentions of getting what's owed, likely for financial gain. I felt sick realizing Adam had been lying to me this entire time. Worse, Amelia, Jenna, was fully complicit. This was my own troubled student, now living under my roof to help fleece her own father. The deception made my head spin. I spent the next few days quietly observing Amelia's behaviors through new eyes. The sneaking out, the rudeness, it was all an act to aggravate Adam and destabilize our household. A long con that my husband had agreed to, for reasons I didn't yet understand. As much as it pained me, I knew I needed to play along for now and gather more evidence. To take them down, I needed to be 2 steps ahead in their own twisted game. Amelia's presence became increasingly unbearable after my discovery of the emails. Knowing she was actively conning us, her every action took on new insidious meaning. The smirks, the sass, the blatant disregard for our house rules, it was all choreographed to undermine Adam and destabilize our home life. "You left your crap all over the living room again," I stated coldly one evening as she sauntered in from another late night out. She shrugged, popping a piece of gum loudly. So, this is our home, not a flop house. Show some respect." "Respect?" She laughed mockingly. "That's rich, coming from you." I bristled, fighting to keep my anger in check. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Like you even know the first thing about me or my life." "Maybe if you acted like a normal human being instead of a rude, entitled brat." "Hey!" Adam's voice cut me off as he entered. "What's going on here?" "Just dealing with your daughter's wonderful attitude as usual," I snapped. Amelia smirked. "Daddy's little princess has a problem following rules, I guess." "Don't start," I warned, but Adam raised his hands placatingly. Okay. Let's all just take a deep breath, all right?" I shook my head in disgust, storming off to the kitchen, as if his calm negotiations would stop this act they were putting on. The worst part? I couldn't even confide in Adam about my discoveries. He was clearly complicit in this scheme with Amelia's mother Jessica, revealing what I knew could spook them into accelerating their con. No, I needed to bide my time and continue gathering evidence to expose their plot. Starting with finding out exactly what getting what's owed meant in those emails. Over the next few weeks, I scoured Adam's computer and files whenever he was away at work, searching for any paperwork or communications that could shed light on Jessica's motivation. What I found made my blood boil. Years ago, when Adam was briefly involved with Jessica, he had gotten her pregnant with Amelia. Instead of taking responsibility, he paid Jessica a lump sum of money to walk away and terminate the pregnancy. Except she hadn't. And now, years later, they were back to extract even more from him through this deception. I felt physically ill realizing the depths of Adam's past betrayal and how Amelia was being used as a pawn for her mother's revenge. This was no longer just a con. It was a vicious, calculated scheme to make my own husband miserable. When Adam returned home that evening, I could barely look at him. He must have sensed my anger because he pulled me aside with forced cheerfulness. "Hey, what's going on? You've seemed really tense lately." I met his gaze levelly. "Have I? Gee, I wonder why that could be, with your lying, conniving daughter making our lives hell." His expression faltered. "Claire, I know she's been difficult, but she's my child. Your child that you once wanted terminated," I hissed, no longer caring about playing dumb. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Jessica's revenge for you trying to make Amelia disappear." Adam's face drained of color. For a long moment he could only sputter uselessly. I shook my head in disgust. I can't even look at you right now. Turning, I headed upstairs, my mind racing with the next steps. With Adam's secret out in the open, there was no more holding back. It was time to dismantle this sick little family con once and for all, by whatever means necessary. With Adam's past deception now exposed, the tension in our household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amelia continued her calculated misbehavior, no doubt trying to further destabilize our home on her mother's behalf. I, however, was done playing their game. If Adam was too cowardly or complicit to put a stop to this, I would take matters into my own hands. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, cornering Amelia in the kitchen one morning before she could slink back to her room. She rolled her eyes. "About what?" "About you and your mother's little scheme to extort money from my husband." Her bravado faltered for just a moment before the sneer returned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb. I know all about the emails between your mom and Adam, plotting for you to move in and make yourself at home here." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and menacing. "Using his own daughter as a pawn to get what's owed? That's low, even for him." Panic flickered across her face before the mask of indifference returned. "You're crazy, lady. I'm just living here, that's all. After he paid your mother to have you terminated as a pregnancy?" That struck a nerve. Amelia's fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred I hadn't seen before. "That's a lie. My mom wouldn't." "Wake up," I snapped, feeling perverse satisfaction at her shock. "Your mom's just using you as a tool for payback over Adam's past choices. This is all one big con." Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Adam stood in the doorway, fury etched across his features as he pulled Amelia protectively behind him. "You've gone too far, Claire. Making up lies to turn my own daughter against me?" I laughed derisively. "That's rich, coming from you. I have the emails, Adam. All the proof of your pathetic deal with Jessica to make Amelia disappear years ago. That's what this has all been about, her revenge, using your own flesh and blood." For once, Adam seemed at a loss for excuses or placating words. Amelia stared between us, her expression unreadable. "Well," I pressed, "aren't you going to admit to your lies, your betrayal of me, of your own family?" Adam's jaw tightened, and I wondered if he might finally come clean. If this would be the moment where... "Get out!" The quiet venom in his voice stopped me cold. "What?" "You heard me," he stated, wrapping an arm around Amelia. "After the cruel, vindictive lies you've spewed, I want you out of this house, tonight." My heart dropped to my stomach as the words hit like a physical blow. "Adam, you can't be serious. This is my home, too." "Not anymore," he said with chilling finality. "Not after you've made it so toxic with your deranged accusations against my daughter." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He was choosing them, the ones deceiving and manipulating him, over his own wife. Tears stung my eyes as I looked between their impassive faces. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had before. Swallowing hard, I met Adam's gaze with as much dignity as I could muster. You'll see the truth soon enough, and when you do..." I shook my head slowly. "Well, don't come crawling back to me." Turning, I headed upstairs to pack what few belongings I could quickly gather. My home, my life, was crumbling around me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. If Adam was too blinded by familial bonds to see the truth, I would make him open his eyes. Whatever it took, I would expose this twisted scheme and make them pay. The real battle was only just beginning. After Adam kicked me out, I spent a few aimless weeks crashing with friends, my mind spinning over how to expose Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. I couldn't simply walk away, not with that vile mother using her own daughter as a pawn against my husband. Eventually, I settled into a small rental apartment, using what little savings I had to get by. More importantly, it gave me a base to operate my counterattack and gather indisputable proof of their con. My first move was to make copies of the damning emails between Adam and Jessica that I had discovered. I also began meticulously documenting every instance of Amelia's calculated misbehavior at home to build a case against her. Next, I hired a private investigator to start digging into Jessica's background. Within weeks, they uncovered a trail of shady activities, unpaid loans, evictions, and a string of wealthy ex-boyfriends she had burned. This was clearly a long pattern of deception on her part. Armed with this new evidence, I requested a sit-down with Adam at a neutral location, a coffee shop near his office. He arrived looking haggard and defensive. "What is this about, Claire? I have nothing left to say to you after your unforgivable behavior." I slid the thick manila envelope across the table. "This is about the truth, the whole truth about your lies, and the con your ex and daughter have been pulling on you." Adam hesitated before flipping open the envelope, his brow furrowing as he thumbed through the documents inside. The email transcripts, the PI's report on Jessica, my logs of Amelia's troublemaking. As the weight of the evidence became undeniable, I could see the conflict playing across his face. Part of him still wanted to cling to deluded denial, but the proof was far too compelling. You went this far?" he finally said, seemingly unsure whether to be awed or outraged. I leaned forward intently. "I had to, Adam. After the way you turned on me and kicked me out over their lies, you left me no choice but to take this into my own hands." Shame flickered across his features, but he remained defensive. "Even if some of this is true, Amelia is still my blood. You don't understand how important that is." I shook my head sadly. "You're right, I don't, because you never gave me the chance to understand by being honest with me from the start." My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a breath to rein in my anger. "Look at the evidence, Adam. Look at what kind of person Jessica really is, using your own child to try to fleece you. Where does her manipulation end? How much further will she go?" He didn't respond, his jaw tensing as he avoided my stare. For a long moment, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse murmur. "You're right. I should have been upfront with you about Amelia from the beginning. I didn't want to risk losing you over my past mistakes." "Well, you did lose me," I stated flatly. "The question now is, are you going to continue letting them use and manipulate you? Or are you finally going to stand up and be a man?" Adam's shoulders slumped, all the fight seeming to go out of him. He looked utterly defeated in that moment, a broken man slowly coming to grips with the reality he had avoided for too long. "I don't know," he muttered, staring down at the envelope's damning contents. "I just don't know anymore." Pushing back from the table, I stood to leave. He didn't try to stop me. "Think it over," I said quietly. "And remember, the truth won't go away, no matter how hard you try to ignore it." As I walked away, I felt a surprising sense of calm determination. For too long I had been on the defensive against Adam and his deceptive family, but now the battlefield was level. The weapons of truth and justice were finally on my side. It was time to go on the attack. Several tense weeks went by without a word from Adam after our confrontation. I tried not to get my hopes up that he was finally seeing the light about Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. He had been too deep in denial for too long. Then one evening my phone rang, Adam asking if we could meet again to talk. I agreed, bracing myself for whatever excuses or rationalization he might throw my way next. When we met at a quiet bar, however, Adam looked utterly despondent. Broken, even. "You were right," he stated flatly after we sat down. "About all of it. Jessica, Amelia, the lies, the manipulation. It was all one big con." Despite the vindication, I felt no joy or satisfaction as I studied his haggard expression. "How did you finally realize?" I asked quietly. Adam dragged a hand down his face, suddenly looking decades older. "After you showed me all that evidence, I couldn't keep deluding myself anymore. I started digging deeper into Jessica's past like you did, and—" He shook his head slowly. "Let's just say she has a pattern of using men to bankroll her lifestyle, then discarding them once she's bled them dry." "So you were just the next target for her and Amelia to sink their claws into," I murmured. "Exactly. And I was the perfect mark, a successful businessman with assets, blinded by my own guilt and desire to play father to the daughter I abandoned." A rueful, self-loathing laugh escaped his lips. "She played me like a damn fiddle from the start." "And Amelia?" I pressed. "What did she have to say when you confronted her about the truth?" A flicker of anguish passed over Adam's features. "At first she denied it, calling me crazy and paranoid like they had you, but once I showed her ironclad proof of her mother's patterns, she just went cold and silent." He slowly shook his head. "My own daughter? Conspiring with her mother to take me for everything I have. All these years, she never gave a damn about having me in her life. I was just a mean to an end for their sick game. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness seeing the dejected man before me, forced to confront such an ugly truth about his own flesh and blood. "I'm so sorry, Adam," I said quietly. "As much as they hurt and betrayed me too, I can't imagine the pain of having your own child turned so monstrous." A hollow laugh escaped his lips. "Well, we reap what we sow, don't we? This is the price for the lies and cowardice in my past, running away from problems instead of facing them." I didn't disagree. Adam's refusal to take responsibility for his past mistakes had opened the door for Jessica to slither back into our lives with her poisonous agenda. "So what now?" I asked carefully. "What are you going to do about them?" Adam's jaw tightened, a flash of the strong man I'd married briefly returning to his eyes. "The only thing I can do. Cut them off for good, once and for all. No more money, no more enabling their sick need for revenge." He looked up at me intently. "And No, I need your help, Claire. You're the only one who had my back through this nightmare, even when I was too blind to see it." I considered for a moment, part of me still stung by the cruel way he had turned on me in siding with Jessica and Amelia before. But seeing this broken man, reaching for a last shred of redemption, I knew I couldn't turn away. Slowly, I reached across the table and grasped his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You've got it. We'll take them down together for good this time. No more lies, no more running. It's time they finally face the consequences." Adam's eyes glistened with a mixture of shame, relief, and renewed determination. He simply nodded. The reckoning was coming. And this time, nothing would stop justice from being served. With Adam finally seeing the truth about Jessica and Amelia's twisted con, we wasted no time springing into action. First order of business: cutting off their access to his money and assets before they could bleed him dry. We met with Adam's lawyers and accountants, laying out the evidence I had gathered so they could erect a legal fortress protecting his finances. Bank accounts were frozen, investment portfolios locked, even his personal credit cards canceled. If those two vipers thought they were going to continue living off my husband's dime, they had another thing coming. Next, we moved to separate Amelia from her enabler mother's influence. Adam contacted Jessica, demanding she come to the house to collect her daughter's belongings immediately. When she arrived with Amelia in tow, I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. "What's going on, Adam?" Jessica simpered, all fake concern. "Why are you kicking my baby out?" "Can it?" I snapped before Adam could respond. "We know all about your little scheme to fleece him using Amelia. The con is over." Jessica's sugary facade quickly melted into a sneer. "You've got no proof of anything, just more of your deranged ramblings, Claire." Smirking, I tossed a thick manila envelope at her feet, the contents spilling out, copies of emails, financial records, the PI's report laying out her patterns of deceit. "Oh, I've got proof all right. Reams of it." Her eyes widened as she scrambled to scoop up the papers, realization dawning. She turned to Amelia desperately. "Baby, this crazy bye. Don't talk to her." Adam's voice boomed. "Surprising us all, you've both done enough here, more than enough." For once, Amelia seemed cowed by her father's intensity, shrinking back slightly. Jessica, however, rallied in defiant anger. "You're making a big mistake, Adam, after everything I've done for you, letting you be part of Amelia's life." "Letting me?" Adam shook his head in disgust. "Using her as a pawn to try to fleece me over past mistakes? That's not any kind of favor. It's reprehensible, and it stops now." You can't do this," Jessica sputtered, panic creeping in as she realized her con was crumbling. "We're family." "No," Adam stated with chilling finality. "You're not my family anymore. Just another mistake to finally put in the past." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, shooting me a look of pure venom before storming out the door, Amelia slinking behind her. As the door slammed, I let out a long breath, adrenaline still coursing through me from the confrontation. Adam simply stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "Well, they're out of our lives for good now," I ventured carefully. "You did the right thing, Adam." He gave a slow nod, still seeming lost in thought. "Maybe. Maybe not. All I know is I can't let that toxicity continue poisoning everything I hold dear." I studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for facing this head-on. Not many men would have had the strength. Adam's gaze finally met mine, stripped of the bravado and denial that had blinded him for so long. I only wish I had that strength sooner, before it all spiraled so far out of control. We stood in silence for a long stretch, the weight of the situation, of all the hurt and betrayal, hanging heavy between us. So much had been lost on the way to this point. Finally, Adam seemed to shake himself from his reverie. Well, I suppose I should start putting my life back together. Try to salvage what I can. I gave him a sad smile. For both our sakes, I hope you can. As I watched him turn and head upstairs, I felt an unexpected pang of melancholy. His entire world had been shattered upon the rocks of lies and deception. But in that wreckage, there was a chance to finally rebuild something stronger. Whether that new life would involve me, however, remained to be seen. For tonight, I simply felt a sense of relief that the worst was over. The con had failed, and sometimes just surviving is victory enough. In the aftermath of finally cutting Jessica and Amelia out of our lives for good, an uneasy truce settled over Adam and me. We were two wounded soldiers, battered from the same war, but still struggling to find common ground. He spent most of his days holed up in his home office, no doubt trying to salvage what was left of his career and finances after having to legally batten down the hatches. I could only imagine the professional embarrassment of having to admit he'd fallen victim to such an insidious family con. As for me, I drifted in the limbo of our guest room, unsure of what my next move should be. Part of me still loved Adam, still wanted to fight for the life we'd had before this nightmare descended. But could I ever truly trust him again after how thoroughly he had dismissed and turned on me? We rarely spoke beyond courteous nods in passing. The shadow of betrayal hung too heavy between us. Then one evening, a heated argument from Adam's office caught my ear, voices raised in anger, his, but also an unmistakable snide female tone. I crept down the hallway toward the cracked door. "You think you've won?" It was Jessica, venom dripping from her words. "You arrogant son of a bitch, you haven't seen the last of this." "Get off my property before I call the police, you vindictive snake," Adam snarled. "You've already cost me everything." "Not everything, lover," she purred menacingly. "Not yet." There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Objects clattering, Adam grunting in anger and exertion. I couldn't stop myself. I burst through the door to see them grappling, Jessica clutching a heavy paperweight as they tussled. "Adam!" I cried in horror, rushing forward to try and separate them. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my head as something struck me from behind. White lights exploded in my vision, and I crumpled dazedly to the floor, my world spinning. "Claire!" Adam's voice seemed to come from a vast distance. "Oh God, Claire!" Blearily, I could make out shapes moving, voices distorting in and out as unconsciousness threatened to claim me. A furious Adam snatching the paperweight from the floor, Jessica's mocking laughter as she backed away. "Who's the snake now, lover? Enjoy the sweet taste of my revenge." Then her voice faded, the only sound Adam's ragged breathing as he cradled me. I could feel warm stickiness spreading through my hair, each pulse of my heartbeat a spike of agony. "Stay with me, baby," Adam pleaded, voice thick. "Don't you dare leave me too." I wanted to respond, to reassure him, but the words stuck in my throat. Blackness crept in from the edges of my vision until everything faded to void. The next days, or was it weeks, passed in a drug-addled haze of pain and disjointed images. Hospital rooms, the acrid stench of antiseptic, murmurs of words like severe concussion and touch and go. When I finally reemerged into full consciousness, it was to find Adam slumped in a chair beside my bed, haggard and unshaven. He startled awake as I stirred, his eyes widening in relief. "Oh, thank God," he rasped, voice cracking with emotion as he grasped my hand. I thought I might lose you too." I struggled to blink the cobwebs from my mind, memories slowly coalescing. "Jessica," I murmured. "She was there?" Adam's jaw tightened with barely contained rage, her final parting shot before the authorities apprehended her. She and Amelia are both in custody now, facing a laundry list of charges. Despite my pounding head, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. At long last, they would face real consequences for their depravity. "I'm so sorry, Claire," Adam went on hoarsely. "If I had just been upfront from the start about Amelia, about my past, none of this would have happened." You never would have gotten hurt because of my lies." I could only gaze at him for a long moment, taking in the broken man before me. Once so self-assured and confident, now brought low by the very secrets he thought could be buried. "You're right," I finally said, squeezing his hand. "This all could have been avoided if you'd just been honest with me." Tears welled in Adam's eyes as he held my stare. "I've lost everything that ever mattered because of my mistakes. My job, my reputation. I'll be lucky if I can rebuild anything from the ashes." Gently, I stroked the stubbled plane of his cheek. "Not everything," I murmured. "Not yet." Adam's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of hope flickering to life in their depths. A fragile, tentative spark in the darkness, but a spark nonetheless. As I gazed at the man I'd once loved, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. Rebuilding trust, piecing together whatever could be salvaged from the wreckage of lies and deceit. But if that spark could catch, if we truly had the strength to overcome the betrayals, perhaps there was still a chance to rekindle what we had lost. The choice would be ours to make. I gripped the edge of the bathroom counter, knuckles white, staring at the damning video on my phone. My heart pounded as I watched Caleb viciously strike our son Ethan again and again, the sickening sounds of his fists hitting flesh echoing off the tiled walls. Ethan's muffled cries tore through me like shards of glass. How could the man I'd once loved, the father of my children, be capable of such brutality? I barely recognized Caleb in that moment. Gone was the polished, successful businessman who charmed everyone he met with his easy smile and impeccable manners. This raging monster, disfigured by hate, was his true self, the one he worked so hard to conceal behind closed doors. My hands shook as tears blurred my vision. "Mommy?" I spun around to see Ella standing in the doorway, her stuffed bunny dangling from one hand. Her big brown eyes were wide with fear at the commotion. "It's okay, baby." I forced a reassuring smile and scooped her up, hugging her tightly. "Mommy just stubbed her toe really hard." Ella nodded solemnly, still looking worried. I brushed her soft curls back, my heart clenching at how innocent and trusting she was. She and Ethan had no idea the hell their father put us through when the doors closed and his mask slipped away. Over Ella's head, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was pale and drawn from years of Caleb's emotional torture, my eyes haunted. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, suffocating under the weight of his control and abuse. But seeing that horrific video was the breaking point. I couldn't let him keep hurting my babies. Not anymore. I held Ella close, determination replacing my fear. "We're gonna be okay," I whispered fiercely. "I promise." I first met Caleb at a charity gala downtown. He looked like he'd stepped right out of a GQ magazine. Impeccably tailored tuxedo, thick chestnut hair perfectly coiffed, that disarming smile. When our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, I felt an electric pull toward him. "Vivian, right?" His deep voice caressed my name as he approached. "I'm Caleb. I've been looking forward to meeting you." We talked for hours, his intense gaze never leaving my face. He hung on my every word, making me feel fascinating, desirable. I was intoxicated by his attentiveness. Caleb came from old money and worked as a high-powered finance executive. He regaled me with stories of his world travels, his charitable endeavors, his love of art and culture. Here was a man of substance, I decided, not just another wealthy, pretty boy. 2 months of whirlwind romance later, Caleb proposed in a plaza in Venice as gondolas drifted by. I said yes without hesitation, giddy to become Mrs. Caleb Westbrook. The wedding was like a fairy tale, designer dress, hundreds of guests, flower arrangements that cost more than my college tuition. Caleb's eyes shone with pride as I floated down the aisle, his arm looped through my father's. I basked in his adoration. Soon I was pregnant with Ethan, thrilled at the prospect of being a doting stay-at-home mom. Caleb insisted on hiring staff to help, nannies, chefs, personal trainers. He wanted me to embrace a life of pampered luxury, to want for nothing. At first, his controlling tendencies were easy to overlook or excuse. He'd get worked up over small things, a wrinkle in his suit, the nanny showing up 2 minutes late. But I chalked it up to the stress of his high-powered career. Caleb worked himself to the bone, providing for us. He deserved grace. Then Ella arrived, and Caleb's behavior took an even darker turn. "You call this a properly set table?" he sneered at our housekeeper, sweeping the plates and silverware onto the floor with one violent motion. Do I have to do everything myself? The poor woman fled in tears as Caleb turned his glare on me. This is unacceptable, Vivian. I expect a certain standard in this household. I flinched, arms tightening around Ella. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. You're damn right it won't. His voice was low, dangerous, because if I see one more mistake, you'll regret it. From that day on, I walked on eggshells around Caleb, never knowing what would set off his hair-trigger temper. The slightest perceived infraction could prompt a tirade of verbal abuse. This pot roast is dry and flavorless. Are you trying to poison us? He shoved his plate away violently, completely inedible. I stared at my feet, cheeks burning with shame. I'm sorry, I'll make something else right away. Don't bother. Caleb's lip curled in disgust. I'll have Maria prepare my meal from now on. At least she can follow basic cooking instructions. Tears pricked my eyes as our housekeeper Maria rushed to make Caleb a new dinner. I felt like a failure as a wife and mother. Caleb scrutinized my every move, from how I dressed and did my hair, to my interactions with the children. Ethan and Ella walked on eggshells too, terrified of provoking his wrath. Sit up straight and stop fidgeting, Caleb barked at Ethan over Sunday brunch. A Westbrook man has poise and confidence. Ethan froze mid-squirm, back ramrod straight. At 8 years old, he understood the consequences of defying his father. If I dared voice any objections to Caleb's unreasonable demands, I was swiftly shut down. Who puts food on this table and keeps a roof over your head? He snarled, towering over me. You're damn lucky to have me. His words reinforced my utter financial dependence on him. I had no income, no assets in my name. Caleb controlled every penny. I was trapped. Caleb also cut me off from my family and friends, insisting they were a bad influence. I went months, even years, without seeing my sister Dana or parents. My world shrank to the confines of our mansion, a gilded prison. The breaking point came when Caleb flew into a rage over Ella's kindergarten artwork, a simple finger painting of flowers. She has no talent, no potential, he scoffed, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it at her feet. I won't allow her to waste time on frivolous pursuits. Ella dissolved into heartbroken sobs, and something inside me finally snapped. I gathered her and Ethan into my arms, shielding them from Caleb's cruelty. That's enough, I cried, voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. They're just children, Caleb. Back off and leave them alone. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed to slits of cold fury. Before I could blink, his hand streaked across my face with stinging force. How dare you talk back to me, he hissed, grabbing a fistful of my hair. I'll teach you some respect, you ungrateful. That night, as Caleb slept off his drunken rage, I crept into Ethan and Ella's rooms and gently roused them. Pack a small bag, very quietly, I whispered urgently. Just a few clothes and special toys. We're going on a little trip. They blinked at me with wide, trusting eyes, but didn't question my instructions. Ethan helped Ella gather her favorite stuffed animals while I threw some essentials into a duffel bag. My heart hammered in my chest as I grabbed my phone and called Dana for the first time in over a year. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Viv? What's wrong? Are you okay? No, I choked out, finally allowing the tears to flow. It's Caleb. He hits me, Dana. He hits the kids too. There was a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, I knew that bastard was trouble. I just knew it. Where are you? Still at home, but I can't stay. Not after tonight. I glanced over at Ethan and Ella, curled together on the couch, clutching their meager belongings. We need to get out before he wakes up. Absolutely. You come here right now. I'll leave the front door unlocked. Get in your car and drive straight here, you hear me? Relief washed over me, knowing my big sister had my back like always. Thank you. I'll be there as soon as I can. After ending the call, I gathered the kids and crept down the stairs, keeping an eye out for any signs of Caleb stirring. I hurried them out the front door and into the waiting car, throwing their bags into the trunk. Ethan looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes as I started the engine. Is Daddy going to be mad we're leaving? My chest tightened, hating that my babies had to know such fear. No, honey. We're just going to stay with Auntie Dana for a little while, that's all. It was a little white lie to protect them. The truth was, I didn't know if we'd ever be coming back here again. I just knew we couldn't stay a moment longer. As we pulled away, I resisted the urge to look back at the cold, imposing facade of the mansion. It had been a waking nightmare, not a home. I took a deep, steadying breath, focusing on the road ahead. For the first time in years, a glimmer of hope bloomed in my chest. We were getting out. We were going to be okay. The next morning, Caleb awoke to find us gone without a trace. Judging by the string of increasingly unhinged voicemails and texts I received, he was in an apocalyptic rage. His messages swung wildly between vicious threats and pleading for me to come back home so he could make things right. I deleted every one without responding. There was no going back, not this time. I was done with Caleb's mind games and empty promises to change. With Dana's help, I filed an emergency petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and years of physical and emotional abuse. The judge granted a temporary restraining order against Caleb, prohibiting him from going anywhere near me, the kids, or Dana's house. For the first time in nearly a decade, I could finally breathe again without fearing his next outburst. Caleb no longer controlled me or my children. We were free. Dana's cozy two-bedroom felt like a sanctuary after the cavernous emptiness of the mansion. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely without Caleb's looming presence. "You're safe here, Viv," Dana assured me, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "That monster can't get to you anymore." I clung to her, letting the tears flow. "Thank you for taking us in. I don't know what I'd do without you." She held me at arm's length, green eyes blazing with protective fury. "You've been through hell, but it's over now. We'll get through this together, okay?" I managed a shaky nod, drawing strength from her unwavering support. With Dana at my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The first few nights, I barely slept, body tensed for Caleb's raging arrival at any moment. Every creak of the house settling made me jolt upright in a cold sweat. But gradually, the comfort and security of being with Dana seeped in. Ethan and Ella adapted quickly too, their fear and stress visibly melting away. Soon they were running and playing without worrying about triggering their father's wrath. The sound of their unbridled laughter was music to my ears. About a week after our arrival, Dana and I were having coffee at her kitchen table when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I frowned but still answered cautiously. "This is she. You ungrateful little bitch." Caleb's voice exploded in my ear, making me flinch. "You think you can just walk out on me? Take my kids?" Dana's head snapped up, eyes narrowing at the venom in his tone. I gripped the phone tighter, mustering my courage. "It's over, Caleb. I've filed for divorce, and there's a restraining order against you. Don't come near us again." He let out a bark of malicious laughter. "A piece of paper won't stop me, Vivian. You're my wife. Those are my children. You'll be crawling back soon enough, begging for forgiveness." "I'll never go back to you." I shot back, anger emboldening me. "Not after what you did to Ethan. I saw the video, you sick fuck." There was a charged pause before he responded, voice low and menacing. "So that's how you want to play it? Fine, but you'll regret turning against me. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The line went dead as he hung up. I stared at the phone, hands trembling. Dana reached across the table, gripping my arm firmly. "Don't let him rattle you, Viv. That's what he wants. We'll fight this asshole and we'll win." I squared my shoulders, feeding off her strength and certainty. For the first time in a long time, I let myself feel hopeful about our future, a future without Caleb's cruelty poisoning every aspect of our lives. No more walking on eggshells. No more fear and intimidation tactics. Just me, my kids, and the freedom to live our lives on our own terms without his abuse holding us back. Caleb could make all the empty threats he wanted. I was done being a victim. From now on, I'd be the one dictating how this story ended. Despite the restraining order, Caleb wasn't deterred from trying to regain control. A few days after his threatening phone call, I was putting the kids down for their afternoon nap when the doorbell rang incessantly. "I'll get it," Dana called out, heading for the front door. I tucked Ella's blanket around her when a booming voice made me freeze. "Where is she? Where's my family?" My blood turned to ice at the unmistakable sound of Caleb's roar. I raced out to the living room to find him shoving his way inside, Dana desperately trying to block his path. "Get out!" she screamed, hands braced against his chest. "You're violating the restraining order." Caleb flung her aside like a rag doll, her small frame crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the floor, dazed. "Dana." I rushed to her side, but she waved me off. "I'm okay, just get the kids." Ethan and Ella had ventured out, eyes wide with terror at the sight of their raging father. Caleb zeroed in on them, face contorted into an ugly snarl. "You two disobedient brats are coming home with me right now." He lunged for them, and I threw myself in front, arms flung out protectively. "Don't you dare touch them!" Caleb backhanded me hard across the face, snapping my head to the side. I could taste blood from a split lip. "Get out of my way, you little whore!" Ethan shrank back against the wall, shaking like a leaf, while Ella began wailing in fear. Caleb made another grab for them, and I kicked him hard in the shin. He grunted in pain, giving me a brief window. "Run!" I screamed at the kids. "Go hide in Dana's bedroom and lock the door." They took off as Caleb recovered, rounding on me with murderous intent. He shoved me down, straddling my body and pinning my arms over my head. His face hovered inches above mine, eyes burning with sick hatred. "You're not taking them from me," he spat, spittle hitting my face. "I'll kill you before I let that happen, you ungrateful bitch." His hands closed around my throat, squeezing viciously. Black spots danced in my vision as I choked and sputtered, legs kicking helplessly. Just as the world started going dim, a heavy ceramic vase shattered against the back of Caleb's skull with a sickening crunch. He slumped forward, finally releasing me as I gasped for air. Dana stood over us, chest heaving, the broken remains of the vase at her feet. "That's for my niece and nephew, you piece of garbage!" Caleb groaned, rolling off me and clutching his bloody head. I scrambled away, coughing violently as Dana dialed 911 with shaking hands. Within minutes, the police swarmed in, taking statements and photographs of our injuries. Caleb was cuffed and hauled out to the squad car, still ranting and raving about his rights as a father. In the chaos, I barely registered Ella's piercing screams coming from the bedroom. I rushed in to find her cradling her rag doll, eyes squeezed shut as blood poured from a gash above her eye. She must have been struck by shrapnel from the vase. White-hot rage blazed through me, burning away any lingering fear of Caleb's retaliation. He had just crossed a line from which there could be no return. From that moment on, I knew there would be no more running, no more hiding, only the total and complete obliteration of Caleb's depraved existence as we knew it. He would pay dearly for ever laying a hand on my babies. Whatever it took, I vowed to utterly destroy him. After Caleb's violent attack, Dana and I knew we couldn't just sit back and wait for his next move. We had to take him down first, permanently and ruthlessly. No more playing defense. "That deranged psychopath isn't going to stop until he's destroyed us all," Dana said grimly as we pored over the evidence, photos of our injuries, the restraining order violation, everything. "We have to hit him from every angle until he has nothing left." I nodded, jaw clenched with grim determination. Any remnants of the meek, cowering woman I'd been under reign of terror were gone. In her place was a merciless force, driven by icy focus and the overwhelming need to protect my children at all costs. "You're right. It's time to go scorched earth on that bastard's entire life." We spent weeks meticulously strategizing, burning the midnight oil to amass an airtight case against Caleb. Dana's law enforcement contacts helped dig up records of his abusive behavior going back years, police reports from exes, former employees' harassment claims, the whole sordid history. I also unearthed evidence of shady business dealings and tax evasion at Caleb's firm. The narcissist had been living way beyond his means, funneling money into slush funds and offshore accounts. He thought he was untouchable. "This is everything we need to take down the great Caleb Westbrook," Dana said, fanning out the thick dossier with a satisfied smile. "The lying, the cheating, the abuse. It's all here in excruciating detail." My lip curled with disgust looking at the paper trail of his depravity. Good, let's burn it all to the ground. We spent weeks making anonymous tips to the IRS, FBI, state financial crimes units, anyone who could bring charges to bear on Caleb's crooked empire. Each agency opened investigations based on our evidence, slowly tightening the vice around his neck. While the wheels of justice began turning, I also filed an explosive civil suit against Caleb, alleging over a decade of physical, emotional, and financial abuse. The lurid claims, backed up by documentation and witness statements, caused a media firestorm. Caleb's lawyers scrambled to contain the fallout as his public image was dragged through the mud. His formerly squeaky clean reputation as a pillar of the community and devoted family man lay in tatters. As the weeks passed, the dominoes continued falling at a dizzying pace. The IRS completed its audit first, hitting Caleb with crushing fines, tax penalties, and frozen assets for his financial crimes. Next came the FBI indictments on fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering charges. With his cash flow dammed up, Caleb was forced to resign in disgrace from his executive position. The company he'd spent decades building quickly moved to cut all ties, fearful of the toxic public relations disaster he'd become. Finally, the restraining order violations and mountain of abuse evidence caught up to him. Caleb was arrested again, this time charged with multiple felonies that could put him behind bars for decades. As I watched the cavalcade of mugshots and shaming headlines, I felt an almost perverse sense of glee. The narcissistic monster who had terrorized me and my children for so long was getting his ultimate comeuppance, a richly deserved downfall of his own making. Caleb had always prided himself on being untouchable, above the rules that governed everyone else. He was about to learn the hard way that no amount of wealth or status could protect him from true justice. The mighty Caleb Westbrook had officially fallen, crashing down in flames. And I had a front-row seat to revel in every agonizing second of it. The day of Caleb's sentencing hearing, Dana and I made sure to get prime seats in the courtroom gallery. I wanted a front-row view of the monster's downfall. Caleb was led in by armed bailiffs, his once impeccable appearance now disheveled, overgrown hair, rumpled suit, haunted eyes. The mighty had fallen so far. I felt a twinge of satisfaction seeing him in handcuffs. The charges against him were lengthy: tax evasion, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, multiple counts of violating restraining orders, and felony assault and battery against me and the kids. It was a laundry list of the most despicable white-collar and domestic crimes. Caleb's expensive legal team tried to bargain for a lighter sentence, citing his previous charitable work and lack of criminal history. But the judge seemed utterly unmoved by their pleas for leniency. The evidence here paints a clear picture of a violent, unrepentant criminal who believed himself to be above the law, the judge stated sternly. Someone who would brutalize his own wife and children has forfeited any right to walk freely among civilized society. With that, he handed down a sentence of 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Caleb's eyes widened in disbelief as the reality hit him. I could see the fight finally leaving his body as the bailiffs moved to take him into custody. "Wait!" he cried out, voice tinged with desperation as his gaze found me in the gallery. "Vivian, please. You have to believe I've changed. I'll get help. We can make this work." I stared back at him, unmoved by his pleading words. He was the same pathetic, manipulative con man he'd always been, unable to take true responsibility. "It's over, Caleb," I said, voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You had your chance to be a decent human being, and you failed spectacularly. Now you get to rot away behind bars like the subhuman piece of filth you are." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him, jaw going slack. In that moment, the last remnants of the suave, sophisticated facade finally cracked away to reveal the sniveling coward underneath. As the bailiffs pulled him out, Caleb fixed me with one last poisonous glare over his shoulder. "You'll regret this, Vivian. You're going to pay." I simply smiled and waved farewell with sardonic sweetness. His empty threats held no power over me anymore. In the end, Caleb lost everything: his career, his wealth, his social standing, even his precious freedom. The mighty Westbrook empire he'd built through corruption and abuse had been burnt to the ground, its ashes scattered to the wind. My once formidable tormentor was nothing more than a caged animal now, his vicious bite permanently defanged. I'd won. In the weeks that followed, I savored my newfound liberation like a delicious wine. Dana and I sold off what remained of Caleb's assets to pay off my legal debts and set up college funds for Ethan and Ella. I even took the kids on a celebratory vacation to Hawaii, building sandcastles and splashing in the waves without a care in the world. For the first time in over a decade, I could finally breathe freely, unburdened from the crushing weight of Caleb's cruelty. The constant fear and tension that had plagued every moment had evaporated like a bad dream. My babies were happy and whole once more. I'd sacrificed and plotted, fought tooth and nail to regain control of our lives. In the end, the blood, sweat, and tears were all worth it to ensure that abusive monster could never hurt us again. Caleb's reign of terror over our family was permanently finished. We were free. We had survived his worst and emerged victorious on the other side. As I gazed at Ethan and Ella's bright, beaming faces, I knew our future was limitless. A new chapter was finally beginning, one of peace, healing, and limitless possibilities unfurled before us, and this time I held the pen. I should have known something was off the moment I stepped through the front door. The living room was in disarray, couch cushions tossed carelessly aside, and the contents of the bookshelf strewn across the floor. A cold dread washed over me as I rushed upstairs to my bedroom. The sight that greeted me made my heart sink. Drawers hung open, clothes spilling out haphazardly. My jewelry box lay overturned on the dresser, its contents scattered like a kaleidoscope of broken dreams. "Paul!" I shouted, my voice trembling with panic. "Get up here now!" Moments later, my husband appeared in the doorway, his expression unnervingly calm. "What's going on?" I gestured wildly at the chaos surrounding us. "What does it look like? We've been robbed." Paul surveyed the scene with an infuriatingly casual demeanor. "Are you sure? Maybe you just misplaced some things." Anger flared within me as I knelt beside the jumbled mess of jewelry. My fingers frantically sifted through the tangle of chains and pendants, but the one item I desperately sought remained elusive. "It's gone," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. My grandmother's necklace is gone. The vintage diamond piece had been a cherished heirloom passed down through generations. More than mere jewels, it embodied the love and resilience of the remarkable woman who had raised me. Paul's voice cut through my anguish. "I'm sure it's around here somewhere. Don't worry, we'll find it." I whirled on him, disbelief and anger contorting my features. "How can you be so calm about this? That necklace is priceless to me." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Kristen, getting upset won't solve anything. Let's just retrace our steps and look for it calmly." But I knew, deep down, that the necklace wasn't simply misplaced. Someone had taken it, stolen a piece of my family's legacy right from under our noses. And as the sickening realization set in, a single name echoed through my mind, one I desperately hoped wasn't behind this violation. Janice. That necklace meant everything to me. More than just diamonds and gold, it was a connection to the woman who had been more of a mother to me than my own. After my parents died in that terrible car accident when I was 8 years old, it was Grandma Rose who took me in and gave me a real home. While other kids my age were playing make-believe, I was learning how to cook, clean, and fend for myself. Grandma never coddled me, but she loved me fiercely in her own way. "Life ain't always pretty, baby girl," she'd say in her thick southern drawl. "But if you got grit and grace, you can make it through any storm." Those words became my mantra, a lifeline I clung to during the darkest days. Because even when the bills piled up and the fridge ran empty, Grandma Rose never lost her unshakable spirit. She worked tirelessly as a seamstress, her calloused fingers deftly guiding the needle and thread. I can still picture her hunched over that old Singer sewing machine, the whirring rhythmic as she brought fabric to life. It was during those long nights, as I drifted off to the comforting hum of the machine, that Grandma would tell me about the necklace. "This here's been in our family for generations," she'd say, her weathered hands cradling the glittering gems. "Passed down from mother to daughter as a reminder of our strength and resilience." To Grandma, those diamonds represented more than just wealth. They were a testament to the sacrifices and perseverance of the women who came before us. With each delicate link in the chain, she wove the tales of our ancestors' triumphs and struggles, binding me to a legacy of unbreakable spirit. "One day this'll be yours, baby girl," Grandma would whisper, "a piece of our history to carry with you always." Those words echoed through my mind as I knelt amid the wreckage of my bedroom, the vacant space where the necklace once rested mocking me. Grandma had trusted me to safeguard our family's heirloom, and I had failed her. "We have to call the police," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of grief and determination. Paul shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. "Let's not jump to conclusions, Kristen. For all we know, You just misplaced it somewhere. I fixed him with a steely glare, my hands balling into fists at my sides. How could he be so blasé about this? Didn't he understand the profound significance of what had been taken? You think I just carelessly lose something that important? I snapped. No, Paul. Someone took it. Someone who knew exactly what that necklace meant to me. As the terrible realization settled over me, a singular name burned like acid on my tongue. The one person I knew was capable of such a heartless act, the one who had always resented my bond with Grandma Rose. Janice. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that Janice's love comes with a steep price, and I was never willing to pay it. From the moment Paul and I started dating, his mother made it abundantly clear that I would never be good enough in her eyes. A girl with no family and no money? She'd sneer, her thin lips curling into a disdainful sneer. Is that really the best you can do, Paul? Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. I had survived far worse than a disapproving mother-in-law, even one as venomous as Janice. Unfortunately, Paul was never able to break free from her toxic grip. Despite my pleading, he remained her obedient little boy, jumping at her every whim and demand. She's just looking out for me, he'd insist, his eyes downcast with shame. You know how worried she gets. I knew better than to argue. Janice had him wrapped around her bony finger, and any attempt to sever that twisted bond would only push him further into her clutches. So I suffered in silence, enduring her endless criticisms and backhanded insults. I was too messy, too loud, too opinionated, a constant disappointment in her eyes. But it was the underhanded digs at my humble upbringing that cut deepest of all. I still can't believe Paul married a girl raised by some old seamstress, she'd sneer, her gaze boring into me with undisguised disdain. He deserves so much better than that. It took every ounce of willpower not to slap that smug expression right off her face. How dare she disrespect the woman who had sacrificed everything to give me a chance at life? Grandma Rose was worth 1,000 of Janice, a true pillar of strength and grace in the face of adversity. While Janice wallowed in her wealth and privilege, Grandma had clawed her way out of poverty with nothing but her calloused hands and an indomitable spirit. The necklace had been her final gift to me, a symbolic passing of the torch from one strong woman to another. And now, thanks to Janice's greed and pettiness, that precious heirloom was gone forever. I could feel the anger simmering within me, a white-hot rage that threatened to boil over. Paul might have been content to let his mother trample all over our lives, but I refused to be her doormat any longer. We're calling the police, I stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. And if you won't stand up to your mother, then I'll handle this myself. Paul's eyes widened in alarm, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Kristen, you can't be serious. It's just a necklace, for God's sake. Just a necklace. How could he be so callous, so dismissive of something that meant the world to me? It's more than just a necklace, Paul, I said, my voice low and trembling with barely restrained fury. It's my heritage, my connection to the woman who made me who I am today. And if you can't see that, if you're willing to let your mother stomp all over that, then maybe we have bigger problems than a missing piece of jewelry. As the words left my lips, I realized they carried a weight far beyond this single act of betrayal. This was about taking a stand, about refusing to let Janice's toxicity poison our lives any longer. If Paul wouldn't fight for me, for us, then I would have to fight for myself. I should have known better than to hope for a moment's peace. Not when Janice was involved. The woman had a sixth sense for sniffing out drama, and my confrontation with Paul must have set off her internal chaos detector. Less than 24 hours after our heated argument, the doorbell rang with that all-too-familiar cadence. 3 sharp trills like a queen announcing her arrival. I'll get it, Paul called out, his voice laced with a mixture of resignation and dread. But I was already making my way to the front door, steeling myself for the inevitable storm that was about to blow through our home. Sure enough, when I pulled it open, there she stood, Janice in all her designer-clad glory. Well, aren't you going to invite me in? She demanded, brushing past me without waiting for a response. I bit back the acidic retort that danced on the tip of my tongue. Engaging with Janice was like fanning the flames of a wildfire. The more oxygen you gave her, the more she burned. To what do we owe the pleasure? I asked instead, my voice taut with forced politeness. Janice made a show of looking around the living room, her nose wrinkling in distaste. Good Lord, Kristen, this place is a sty. Haven't you heard of dusting? I opened my mouth to respond, but Paul cut me off with a nervous chuckle. Now, Mother, you know Kristen works hard to keep everything tidy. Clearly not hard enough, Janice sniffed, casting a disdainful glance in my direction. The urge to throttle her was becoming overwhelming, but I managed a tight smile. I'll get us some coffee. As I retreated to the kitchen, I could hear Janice's shrill voice carrying through the house. Honestly, Paul, I don't know how you put up with her. You could do so much better, you know. My hands trembled with barely restrained rage as I fumbled with the coffee mugs. How dare she speak about me like that, as if I were some sort of burden to be endured? By the time I returned to the living room, Janice had made herself quite at home, her bony frame perched on the edge of the sofa like a vulture surveying its prey. Paul sat in the armchair across from her, his shoulders hunched and his gaze averted. There you are, Janice said, fixing me with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. I was just telling Paul how lovely it would be if we could have a proper family dinner this weekend. You know, a chance for us to catch up and spend some quality time together. The words oozed from her mouth like poisoned honey, and I felt my stomach churn with dread. A family dinner with Janice was akin to a medieval torture session. 2 hours of endless needling and criticism, all while forcing hollow smiles. That sounds lovely, I lied through gritted teeth, setting the coffee tray down with more force than intended. Janice's gaze drifted to the disarray of my jewelry box, still scattered across the dresser top. Good heavens, Kristen, what happened here? It looks like a tornado blew through. A familiar prickle of unease crept up my spine as her beady eyes raked over the jumbled mess of chains and pendants. Surely she couldn't know, could she? Actually, we think we were robbed yesterday, Paul piped up, shooting me a nervous glance. Some things went missing, including that tacky old necklace of Kristen's, Janice interjected with a dismissive wave of her hand. The one from her grandmother, right? The casual way she spoke of the necklace, as if it were little more than a worthless bauble, sent a spike of white-hot fury through my veins. You know about the missing necklace? I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Janice met my gaze with an infuriatingly bland expression. Of course, dear. Paul mentioned it when I arrived. But her eyes, those soulless pits, betrayed something else entirely. A flicker of smugness, of twisted satisfaction at my pain. In that moment, I knew the truth with every fiber of my being. The necklace hadn't been taken by some random thief. It had been stolen by the very woman sitting before me, the one who had always resented and envied my bond with Grandma Rose. You. The word caught in my throat, rage and disbelief rendering me momentarily speechless. Janice merely arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow, her thin lips curving into a serpentine smile. Me? She purred, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. Why, Kristen? Whatever do you mean? The silence that followed Janice's thinly veiled taunt was deafening, a vacuum of tension that threatened to swallow us whole. I could feel Paul's worried gaze boring into me, silently pleading for me to let it go, to keep the peace. But how could I? How could I possibly sit idly by while this vile woman not only stole from me, but mocked me to my face? You know exactly what I mean, I growled, my fingers curling into white-knuckled fists at my sides. That necklace was priceless to me, and you took it out of pure spite. Janice's eyes widened in a parody of innocence, her perfectly manicured hand fluttering to her chest. Why, Kristen, I'm absolutely appalled that you would accuse me of such a thing. I may have my faults, but theft? Really, dear, you're being quite dramatic. The sickly sweet condescension in her tone was like acid on an open wound. I wanted nothing more than to wipe that smug, self-satisfied smirk off her face once and for all. Don't play dumb with me, Janice, I spat, taking a step closer to her perch on the sofa. We both know you've had it out for me from the start. That necklace was my connection to Grandma Rose, and you couldn't stand the fact that she loved me more than you. A flicker of something dark and ugly passed over Janice's features, her carefully cultivated mask of gentility slipping for the briefest of moments. Ah, there it was, the jealousy and resentment that had festered like an open wound for all these years. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a low venomous rasp. "That old crone may have doted on you, but she was nothing more than a common seamstress. Certainly not the kind of influence a young woman of means should have in her life." "Mother, please." Paul's timid voice cut through the tension, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was the white-hot rage coursing through my veins, the urge to lash out and make Janice pay for her cruelty. How dare she speak of Grandma Rose with such disrespect? The woman who had sacrificed everything to give me a chance at life, who had instilled in me the values of strength and resilience that her own daughter so sorely lacked. "You're wrong," I said, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "Grandma Rose was worth 1,000 of you. She may not have had money or status, but she had integrity and heart. 2 things you'll never understand, you miserable, spiteful hag." The words tumbled from my lips in a torrent of pent-up rage, each one a dagger aimed at the heart of Janice's fragile ego. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of something akin to hurt flash across her features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that infuriatingly smug sneer. "Well, well," she clucked, shaking her head in mock disappointment. Such language from the woman who claims to have been raised with manners and grace, although I suppose we can't expect much from someone of your background. The thinly veiled dig at my humble upbringing was the final straw. I opened my mouth to unleash a fresh volley of vitriol, but Paul's voice cut through the haze of fury like a bucket of ice water. "Enough," he shouted, surging to his feet and planting himself between Janice and me. "I won't have the 2 of you going at each other like this, not in my own home." I recoiled as if he had struck me, stunned by the rare display of backbone from my typically docile husband. For once, the mask of the obedient son had slipped, revealing a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. Strong, decisive, and unwilling to be cowed by his mother's manipulations. But as quickly as that spark of defiance had ignited, it faded, extinguished by the weight of years of conditioning and emotional subjugation. "Mother's right," he said, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "This has gone too far. The necklace is just a material possession, and accusing her of stealing it is unacceptable." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my tongue as I watched him turn to face Janice, his expression a mask of shame and contrition. "I'm so sorry you had to endure such disrespect, Mother," he murmured, his voice thick with remorse. "It won't happen again, I promise." As he wrapped his arm around her bony shoulders in a gesture of misguided filial devotion, I felt something inside me shatter. In that moment, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity that Paul would never truly be on my side, not when it came to his mother. No matter how much she belittled me, no matter how far she took her cruelty, he would always choose her in the end. And as I watched them embrace, united in their twisted, toxic bond, I knew that if I wanted justice for what Janice had done, I would have to take matters into my own hands. The drive up to the lake house should have been a peaceful respite, a chance to escape the suffocating tension that had engulfed our home. But as Paul and I navigated the winding roads in silence, the weight of unspoken accusations hung heavy in the air between us. It had been 3 days since my explosive confrontation with Janice, 3 days of simmering resentment and bitter silence. Paul had made it abundantly clear where his loyalties lay, choosing to bury his head in the sand rather than acknowledge his mother's despicable actions. As for me, I was done playing the role of the dutiful, long-suffering wife. Grandma Rose hadn't raised me to be a doormat, and I refused to let Janice trample all over her legacy any longer. The proof I needed had arrived in the form of a nondescript envelope, slipped unceremoniously through the mail slot 2 days ago. Inside was a single piece of paper, a pawn shop receipt detailing the sale of a vintage diamond necklace, the very one that had been stolen from my home. I had pored over the document obsessively, my fingers tracing the damning evidence of Janice's betrayal. The date, the description, even the listed seller's name. It all added up to an undeniable truth that Paul refused to accept. His mother was a thief, a vindictive snake, who would stop at nothing to hurt me, to sever my connection to the woman she had always envied and resented. But this time, I wouldn't let her win. This time I would make her pay. The plan had been forming in my mind for days, a slow burn of righteous fury and calculated revenge. and as we pulled up to the secluded lake house, the final pieces clicked into place. "Isn't this nice?" Paul ventured, his voice tentative as he killed the engine. A whole weekend away, just the two of us. I forced a tight smile, willing my features into a mask of forced calm. "Yes, it'll be wonderful to get away from everything." His brow furrowed slightly at my pointed emphasis, but he didn't press the issue. Typical Paul, always eager to avoid confrontation, even when it was long overdue. We unpacked in silence, the tension between us a living, breathing thing. As the sun began to dip below the tree line, I made my move. "I'm going to take a walk down by the water," I announced, already heading for the door. "Clear my head a bit." Paul hesitated, his mouth opening as if to protest, but I was already gone, the screen door slamming shut behind me. The pawn shop was a hole-in-the-wall establishment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that dealt in discretion as much as merchandise. Perfect for someone like Janice, who valued her reputation above all else. The bell above the door jangled as I stepped inside, and a wiry man with beady eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he drawled, his gaze raking over me with poorly veiled suspicion. I steeled my nerves and met his stare head-on, reaching into my pocket for the crumpled receipt. "I'm looking for a necklace that was sold here recently," I said, sliding the paper across the glass countertop. "A vintage diamond piece, according to this receipt." The man's eyes narrowed as he scanned the document, his lips pressing into a thin line. For a moment I feared he would refuse to cooperate, that my carefully laid plans would unravel before they could even begin. But then, slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, I remember this one," he grunted, disappearing into the back room. My heart thundered in my chest as I waited, every second feeling like an eternity. Finally he reappeared, a velvet pouch clutched in his gnarled hand. "Here it is," he said gruffly, upending the pouch onto the counter. There it was, Grandma Rose's necklace, the delicate chains and glittering diamonds that had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. A piece of my heritage, my connection to the woman who had made me who I was. And it had taken everything in me not to snatch it up right then and there, to clutch it to my chest and never let it go again. But I couldn't, not yet. Not until I had made Janice pay for what she had done. "I'll take it," I said, my voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotion swirling within me. The pawnbroker eyed me warily, no doubt sensing the barely contained fury simmering beneath my calm exterior. "You sure about that, lady?" he asked, his gaze flickering to the receipt once more. "'Cause according to this, that necklace don't belong to you." I leaned forward, holding his gaze with every ounce of steely determination I possessed. "It belongs to me," I said, each word dripping with conviction. "And I'll do whatever it takes to get it back." The drive back to the lake house was a blur, my mind whirling with the weight of what I had just done. The necklace burned a hole in my pocket, a constant reminder of the line I was about to cross, and just how far I was willing to go to make Janice pay. Paul was already asleep when I slipped back inside, his soft snores drifting from the bedroom. Good, the fewer questions the better. I needed him as far removed from this as possible, both for his own sake and mine. With trembling hands, I retrieved the velvet pouch from my jacket and carefully upended it onto the kitchen counter. There it was, the diamonds winking at me in the dim light, a silent taunt, daring me to go through with my plan. I traced the delicate links with the pad of my finger, steeling my resolve. This was about more than just a piece of jewelry. It was about righting a wrong, about standing up to the toxic force that had plagued my life for far too long. Janice had started this game, and now it was time for me to finish it, on my terms. The rest of the night passed in a flurry of activity, each meticulous step etched into my memory with razor-sharp clarity. The supplies gathered, the plan set in motion, every contingency accounted for. By the time the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, I was ready. The drive into town was a silent one, the radio purposefully muted as I navigated the deserted streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, my heart thundering in my ears like a caged animal desperate to be set free. Finally, I pulled up to the familiar suburban house, its manicured lawn and pristine exterior a carefully cultivated facade, just like the woman who dwelled within. I killed the engine and sat in silence for a long moment, watching as the curtains in the upstairs window twitched ever so slightly. She was awake, no doubt already planning her next round of manipulations and petty cruelties. Well, not today. With a deep, steadying breath, I slipped from the car and made my way up the immaculate path to the front door. The necklace was a reassuring weight in my pocket, a talisman of sorts, a reminder of why I was here, of the justice I sought. The doorbell echoed through the cavernous foyer like a death knell, and I could practically feel Janice's confusion and disdain radiating from the other side of the door. Who in the world? Her shrill voice carried, growing closer with each clipped footfall. The moment stretched into an eternity as the lock clicked and the door swung open, revealing Janice in all her silk-robed glory. Her perfectly coiffed hair was mussed, her face devoid of makeup, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that would soon be shattered. "Kristen," she sneered, her brow furrowing in distaste. "What on earth are you doing here at this hour? And without Paul, no less?" I said nothing, merely reached into my pocket and withdrew the necklace, letting the delicate chains pool in my upturned palm. Janice's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. For a fleeting moment, I saw the mask slip, revealing the petty, grasping creature that lurked beneath. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, her gaze darting furtively left and right, as if afraid someone might overhear. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face as I drank in her discomfort, her sudden loss of control. "From the pawn shop," I said, my voice low and laced with triumph. "The same one you sold it to after you stole it from my home." Janice recoiled as if I had struck her, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her mouth in a parody of shock. "I did no such thing," she sputtered, her eyes wide and wild. "How dare you accuse me?" "Save it, Janice," I cut her off, taking a step closer. "I have proof. The receipt, the dates, it all lines up. You took the one thing that meant everything to me out of pure spite and jealousy." For a moment, she seemed to waver, her bravado cracking under the weight of my accusations. But then, like a switch being flipped, that familiar mask of haughty disdain slammed back into place. "Well, well," she sneered, tossing her head with a derisive sniff. "It seems someone has developed quite the flair for the dramatic. Tell me, Kristen, did your darling grandmother teach you those theatrics? Or did you simply inherit her penchant for making a spectacle of yourself?" The barb hit its mark, a white-hot flare of rage licking at my insides. How dare she drag Grandma Rose into this, using her memory as a weapon against me? But I refused to take the bait, to let her goad me into an emotional outburst that would only feed her twisted sense of superiority. Instead, I simply smiled, a slow, predatory curl of the lips that made Janice's eyes narrow with sudden uncertainty. "You're right, Janice," I purred, taking another deliberate step forward. "I did inherit something from my grandmother." I was close enough now to see the flicker of unease in her gaze, the slightest chink in her armor of smug self-assurance. "Her strength," I continued, my voice a low, dangerous rasp. "Her resilience. Her refusal to let petty, vindictive people like you grind her down." Janice opened her mouth, no doubt, to deliver a scathing retort, but I didn't give her the chance. In one fluid motion, I reached out and grabbed a fistful of her silk robe, yanking her forward with a strength that belied my slight frame. "So you can keep your money, your status, your pathetic delusions of grandeur," I hissed, our faces mere inches apart. "Because at the end of the day, I have something far more valuable, the knowledge that I am a better woman than you could ever hope to be." With that, I released her, letting her stagger back in a flurry of ruffled silk and indignant sputtering. But I was already turning away, the necklace clutched in my hand like a victor's spoils. As I strode back down the path toward my car, Janice's outraged shrieks followed me like a bitter requiem. "You'll regret this, Kristen. Do you hear me? You haven't seen the last of me." But her threats fell on deaf ears. Because in that moment, as the morning sun crested over the rooftops and bathed me in its warm glow, I knew that I had already won. Janice might have money and status, but I had something far more precious. The strength of my convictions, the knowledge that I had stood up for what was right. And as the necklace glittered in the light, a piece of my heritage restored, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The calm that comes with knowing you have honored the legacy of those who came before. Grandma Rose would have been proud. The aftermath of my confrontation with Janice was like a whirlwind, a maelstrom of emotions and consequences that threatened to sweep me away. As I pulled up to the lake house, necklace clutched tightly in my trembling hand, a part of me half expected Paul to be waiting on the porch, suitcase in hand, and recriminations on his lips. But when I stepped through the door, the living room was empty, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he had decided to take my side for once. That illusion was swiftly shattered by the sound of his voice drifting in from the kitchen. "Absolutely unacceptable, Mother. I don't care what she said or did. That kind of behavior is inexcusable." My heart sank as I rounded the corner to find him pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. Of course he was talking to Janice, no doubt being regaled with her twisted version of events. Paul's eyes went wide when he saw me, his mouth snapping shut with an audible click. "I have to go," he muttered into the receiver, never taking his gaze off me. "We'll discuss this later." The heavy silence that followed was suffocating, a palpable weight that threatened to crush us both. I could see the questions swirling in Paul's eyes, the desperate need for an explanation warring with his deeply ingrained instinct to avoid confrontation. Finally, he spoke. What happened? Such a simple question, and yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. I could have lied, could have downplayed the events of the morning and tried to smooth things over. But I was done with lies, done with tiptoeing around Janice's fragile ego and toxic manipulations. "I got the necklace back," I said simply, holding it up for him to see, "from the pawn shop where your mother sold it after she stole it from our home." Paul's brow furrowed, his mouth working soundlessly for a moment as he processed my words. That's not possible," he finally managed, shaking his head vehemently. "Mother would never do something like that. She's not a thief, Kristen." The blind devotion in his voice, the utter refusal to even entertain the possibility that his precious mother could be anything less than perfect, was like a physical blow. "Open your eyes, Paul," I exploded, unable to contain my frustration any longer. "I have proof, the receipt, the dates, everything. She took that necklace out of pure spite because she knew how much it meant to me." "No," Paul whispered, his face ashen. "No, you're wrong. You have to be." In that moment, I realized that no amount of evidence would ever be enough to sway him. Janice had him so thoroughly brainwashed, so twisted up in her web of lies and manipulation, that he would always take her side, no matter how despicable her actions. And as that painful truth sank in, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Because for the first time I saw Paul for what he truly was, a weak, spineless man so crippled by his mother's toxicity that he would never be able to fully commit to me, to our marriage. "You know what?" I said, my voice low and laced with resignation. "Believe what you want, Paul. But I'm done walking on eggshells around your mother. I'm done letting her treat me like garbage and disrespect everything I hold dear." I took a step closer, holding his gaze with every ounce of steely determination I possessed. "This necklace represents more than just diamonds and gold. It's a symbol of the strength and resilience that Grandma Rose instilled in me. The same strength that let me stand up to your mother and take back what was rightfully mine." Paul opened his mouth, no doubt to protest or make excuses, but I didn't give him the chance. "So you can keep making apologies for her, keep turning a blind eye to her cruelty and pettiness, but I refuse to be a part of that toxic cycle any longer. Not when it means sacrificing my self-respect and the legacy my grandmother fought so hard to give me." The words hung heavy in the air, a gauntlet thrown down between us. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of my ultimatum stretching out in the silence. Finally, Paul's shoulders slumped in defeat, and I saw the flicker of the man I had once loved extinguish in his eyes. "If that's how you really feel," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing, merely turned and headed for the door, the necklace clutched tightly in my fist. As I stepped out onto the porch, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. Paul was still standing in the kitchen, his back to me and his head bowed in resignation. A part of me ached to go to him, to find a way to make things right, but I knew deep down that it was too late for that. The ties that bound him to his mother were too strong, too deeply ingrained to ever be severed. So I did the only thing I could. I kept walking, letting the screen door slam shut behind me with a finality that reverberated in my soul. As I made my way to the car, the morning sun glinting off the diamonds in my hand, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace amidst the turmoil. Because for the first time in my life, I was truly free, free from Janice's toxic grip, free from the burden of trying to please a woman who would never be satisfied. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure, but as I clutched the necklace to my chest, I knew that Grandma Rose would have understood. She too had walked away from situations that threatened to diminish her spirit, her sense of self-worth. And in that moment, as I turned to face an uncertain future, I knew that her strength, her resilience, flowed through my veins like a wellspring of courage and determination. Whatever came next, I would face it head-on, unbowed and unbroken. Because that was the legacy she had passed down to me. A legacy far more precious than any diamond or jewel. A legacy of grace under fire, of dignity in the face of adversity. And for the first time in far too long, I felt truly worthy of carrying that mantle.